In 2000, a team of anthropologists studying the Anasazi people made a grisly discovery. What they found were human remains that had been badly damaged. But these split long bones with evenly spaced notches along them weren't a sign that this person was attacked by an animal or even another human. This person was butchered. Cannibalism, or the act of consuming human flesh, is known as our oldest taboo, and yet it's been a part of our story since its very beginning. Join us as we retrace cannibalism's journey from sacred funeral rite to an act that condemned an entire continent. Along the way, we'll learn the different kinds of cannibalism and how we might still be partaking in this ancient ritual today. This is Impolite Society.
You're listening to Impolite Society with Laura and Rachel.
We are now entering the land of the podcast. It's the podcast land.
It's full of daisies and audio problems.
And danger.
And pork! I made this big pork roast this week, right? You know, I've got a crock pot out, and I put it in there because we all know, right? My moniker is the pork princess. I do fucking love pork. It's my favorite.
I mean, it comes up semi-regularly.
But every time I eat these tacos and I get pork in my teeth. So I've been picking it out of my teeth all week and like flossing and stuff like that. But that just made me think, you know what they say tastes very similar to pork?
I have 3 guesses.
I'm going to tell you the answer. It's humans. People say humans taste like pork.
You know, I've heard it referred to as long pig before.
Absolutely. And in my embalming days, when I was like cutting people up, human ribs did look remarkably like pork ribs in the grocery store. Like, because you look at beef ribs and they've got that really deep red color. The pork ribs are like a lighter pinky kind of look.
Oh, don't tell me that. Don't tell me that.
But it's interesting that we happen to be talking about this, right?
Is it?
Because, completely coincidental.
So serendipitous.
We happen to have a message and a great question from our friends at the Reluctant Historian podcast.
Let's take a listen.
Hey, Laura and Rachel. I'm Liz.
And I'm Dakota.
We're from the Reluctant Historian podcast, and my husband is fascinated by something super taboo that we talked about on our episode about the Donner Party.
Cannibalism. I love cannibalism. Not doing it, of course, but hearing stories about it or watching movies where it happens. I don't know why I love it. Probably since it's so taboo.
So, for your Fan Friday, we'd love to hear you tackle this topic and tell us why cannibalism is so taboo.
Liz and Dakota, thank you so much for sending in this question. This is a great question. You are the first ones to ask a question in this new type of episode that we are doing that is Indie Inquiries.
Yes, we are adding this into the rotation. It's where we partner with some of the best indie podcasts out there, and we get their rude questions and we answer it. So Liz and Dakota, thank you very much for sending your question. This was something that we definitely had wanted to get to, but it took you putting it so eloquently into a little sound clip and sending it by magical fairy to us to plop in the midst of our podcast to finally answer it.
Why is cannibalism so taboo? I mean, you just mention it and people have such a visceral reaction to it.
Yep.
What is the first thing that you think of when you think of cannibals, Rachel?
It makes me want to hurl. It actually reminds me of a story from when I was in high school and I was in theater, and as you can imagine, hanging out with the theater kids, they were very interesting. They were
very theatrical.
They were weird. We were the weird kids. It was like an episode out of Glee. Somebody threw food at us once when we were doing a flash mob in the cafeteria. But that was a different story. Today, we are backstage of my freshman year of high school, and one of the other kids is talking to me. He asked me a question, and it haunts me to this day. He said, okay, what if you were eating the best meal of your life, and you got halfway through, and somebody told you, that's human? Would you stop? Like it was some big decision. I was like, no, I would barf. I would literally stop and vomit up what I was eating. The thought of eating humans disgusts me profoundly.
Wow. Okay, so very strong reaction to it. That's pretty common. When I think of cannibalism, I think of the deep famines in human history. So like the Russian famines in like the 40s and 30s and the Great Leap Forward in China. You know, people talk about like Hitler and how terrible he was, and like, listen, he was fucking terrible. But you know who's killed more people? Stalin and Mao. I said Stalin weird. Stalin.
He's suddenly from the Midwest. He's going to eat a bagel.
Stalin and Mao starved out millions of their own people. Like, that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think of cannibalism, is these people who are just absolutely choked out by their own government and having to make really hard choices. And when their parents, siblings, cousins die of starvation in front of them, everyone around you is also starving, what are you gonna do?
Oh, well, that definitely makes this a little bit more of an area of gray than my initial just disgust at the concept.
But I think that's common. There's like multiple areas of cannibalism. There is survival cannibalism, and then there's just like, I like to eat people cannibalism.
Yes, you can't forget the serial killers.
There is also stories about tribes killing enemies and eating their parts. And then there's another type of cannibalism that we're going to get into when we get into the research that's a little bit more palatable. We'll get to that. There's just a lot to think of when you think of cannibalism. So take those images in your head, listener. Think about Rachel barfing when she hears that the greatest meal she's ever had in the world was actually humans. Think of starving in the wilderness.
On a mountaintop in the Andes.
Yeah. But so without some of those images in your head, we're going to dive into that research. We all know what cannibalism, and we've all seen Silence of the Lambs, right?
Yes, we've all seen it and know it very well, can quote it. I've definitely seen Silence of the Lambs.
I'm detecting a little bit of insincerity in
What?
your voice.
What? No.
You've never seen Silence of the Lambs?
I'm a normal person. I've seen Silence of the Lambs. I didn't grow up under a rock.
But did you grow up under a rock, Rachel?
No, I'm pretty sure I've seen it.
I'm pretty sure I've seen it. Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me.
Oh, that part I know, but I never know if I've ever seen it, if it's just part of the zeitgeist. It's out there in the cultural collective that I don't have to see that man tuck his penis. I know what it looks like.
I love Silence of the Lambs. Clarice Starling was one of my idols growing up. She's amazing. But anyway, okay. I think it's important to kind of define cannibalism here at the top, even though we all know what it means. But
even though we already talked about it a little bit.
Exactly.
So if you were really confused for that first section, buckle in, because we're going to catch you up.
I'm going to define it because there's a different term that I'm going to use a little bit later that you might not be familiar with.
And that you might not be able to pronounce.
Cannibalism, as defined, is the act of consuming another individual of the same species as food, with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Cultural reference.
You know, only like 30 years old. Oh, God, is it 40 years old now? Oh, shit.
It's timeless. It knows no age.
It is timeless. Thank you.
And then they made a TV show about it called Young Hannibal. Well, he's like a little kid in Texas, and he's kind of mouthy.
No, that's Young Sheldon. It's just called Hannibal, not Young Hannibal.
Same difference.
Lots of species participate in cannibalism. I guess that's a way to put it. Or is it do?
They cannibalize.
There you go.
Cannibalize!
Lots of species cannibalize other species on the semi-regular basis, and it's not just because they're hungry. So lions and bears, they kill the offspring of other males and eat them. Birds, they eat their siblings and other eggs almost constantly because birds are disgusting.
Birds are savage. Some little miniature dinosaurs. Just remember that.
Birds are particularly disgusting. I watched a special on them one time and like all the disgusting shit they do. And I'm like, I don't like birds no more, y'all.
But they're also beautiful.
Yeah.
And they make houses.
Yeah.
They make little tunnels. I also love dinosaurs, so that explains that. But you don't trust them. They're savage.
And some female insects, they eat their mates. Spiders do this. And we can just all add that to the list of reasons why we fucking hate spiders.
She's pushing them away before they can reject her. Psych 101.
She has been burned, and she will not let it happen a second time.
Mm-hmm. That's called trauma.
Yeah. Okay, why do all these animals participate in cannibalism? Because they're hungry. I mean, they're just like me. A few glasses of wine, record a podcast. You just want a snack.
Yeah, you can't resist the urge to snack.
That's maybe a little bit of an oversimplification. It's not true. So it's a little more complicated than that. Bears and lions, they kill their competitors' offspring so that the females, they'll go into heat sooner. Once their babies die, they go into heat sooner and then they can propagate their own genes.
So that's more of a evolutionary benefit for passing on their gene.
Precisely.
So I got to get rid of you, Simba, so I can get it on with your hot mom.
Yep.
To me, the killing is kind of at the core there. They're just doing the dirty work. They got to do, it's like a chore. Take out the trash. But it comes to animals, and I feel like especially cats, once it's in your mouth and it's bloody and it kind of tastes like meat.
Yeah, I mean, things get out of hand. You take a bite here and there. You kill with your teeth.
You're just like, oh, it's already in there. It's just going to go down the hatch.
Birds, they have a very highly competitive ecosystem. They need to pick off the weak. That's why they kind of eat their siblings, and they also eat other eggs because they're easy meals. Female insects that eat their mates, they actually do it because they need part of that extra oomph of calories at that moment to gestate.
Oh, I believe that, because you see how many eggs they make in one sitting?
Ugh, it's disgusting. I'm just thinking about a female spider with like an egg sac on her back, and it makes my skin fucking crawl.
Imagine if you menstruated that much. That would be insane. Just 1,000 eggs every month. Boo, boo, boo. You'd be hungry too. Watch out, man.
Yeah. And the truth of the matter is that pretty much any animal will eat another of their species if they're hungry enough. I don't think that surprises any of us.
Nature finds a way.
Thanks, Malcolm. But hunting your own species on the regular, it turns out that it's a lot of work. So it is not part of a well-balanced breakfast for those top predators. It's an occasional indulgence. So
if the opportunity presents itself.
Exactly. Or if when you're down on your luck and food is scarce, you can do yourself kind of a double duty benefit with you've got a hot meal and you also have one less competitor out there that may take your food.
Some big brain activity.
When Liz and Dakota sent us this message, they weren't thinking about bugs and shit, right?
No.
We're going to get to the real story of what we came here to talk about after the break. What we all came here to talk about, really, was anthropophagy.
Okay, one more time for us slow people. Anthropophagy. Did I get it?
Go.
Yes.
Yep. Anthropophagy. And that's that term that I referenced that you might not be familiar with. Anthropophagy is the eating of human flesh by human beings. It's really this idea of eating other humans that's said to be one of our oldest, most ingrained taboos.
And I believe it.
But is it really? Because it's super common throughout human history. And not just in the survival, just crash landed in the Andes, Donner Party kind of way that we all think of when we think of cannibalism. It was common in a ritualized manner throughout the history of the world. And so I'm not going to talk much today about sexual cannibalism, perverse cannibalism like Jeffrey Dahmer, like the whole serial killer genre here, or survival cannibalism. I'm really focusing in on cannibalism part of culture. And I think personally that survival cannibalism is a bit of a no-brainer. If you're starving to death, you will eat anything. You might have some high and mighty ideas about what you're going to do, but when you're literally dying, you're going to eat anything that's in front of you, human or trash or whatever. If I just miss my mid-afternoon snack, I'm probably going to eat something out of the garbage, no joke. So it's not much of a stretch to the imagination that I would eat Rachel's dead body after 10 days of no food in the Andes Mountains.
Well, joke's on you because I'm hella salty. Because I think that we can all maybe imagine how someone would resort to survival cannibalism. But then on the flip side, the sexual cannibalism is always going to be a taboo, right? Like that's not going to be determined by cultures. But if you really got to kill and consume someone to get your jollies off, like that's never going to be a part of a culture.
That is always going to be a no-go. There's not a lot of cultures that are like, yay, murder!
Yeah, let's kill people willy-nilly.
So anthropophagy, it has been happening as far back as we can tell. It's really hard for scientists to say exactly how common it was in the proto-human days or those pre-written language days. But we know enough to know that it happened. Archaeologists have found Neanderthal bones that have cut marks on them and broken long bones. All of these things are signs that indicate butchering.
Oh my gosh, were they going for the marrow?
They were the very nutritious marrow.
At least they knew what was good.
Yeah, and the long bone specifically, you're not going to get much out of, a little rib here or a rib there. But if you crack a femur open, it's got that jelly fat goodness on the inside.
Oh, man.
These archaeologists, they found the same thing in Homo sapien skeletons.
Yes, so that shows that we're not really any better than Neanderthals. We're out there carving each other up for Thanksgiving dinner as well.
And pop quiz trivia for you, Rachel.
Oh, man.
How many calories do you think are in the human body?
Okay. Let me do some quick mental math. There's 560 calories within a Big Mac.
How many Big Macs do we eat?
How many Big Macs am I? Okay, let's see. I don't know the weight, though, so the weight to calorie conversion's not working out here. I think there could probably be 12 Big Macs in my left leg, and then, so 24 in the bottom half. My abdomen could easily be 60. I don't know. How many Big Macs does it take to fill a D cup? Okay. I'm going to speculate 50, another 60. So I'm over at 100. What's 130 times 560?
I have no idea.
Oh, I thought you had a calculator out.
No.
I would say that there is 67,200 calories within my body if you're doing a base Big Mac conversion.
You are incorrect.
What?
A human body contains about 130,000 calories.
Oh my gosh. Okay. You were using the European standard of Big Macs, and I was using the American standard of Big Macs. That is why our conversions were off. There's their metric system, the metric Big Mac.
Well, this is also based upon bodies in like the 1940s and the 1950s that don't account for as many Big Macs as we eat today. So it's probably more so in the modern human, or more importantly, the modern American. I'm definitely more than 130,000 calories in this body.
I would say that I'm probably like 157,200.
Well, these were male human bodies that did the combination. So I would gather to guess that you're less.
I might be a diet snack.
Exactly. I mean, but I still feel like I can live on you in a good long time in the 80s.
Definitely. Okay, a regular human needs like 1,500 calories a day to maintain, or do you eat any calories just to not die, right?
Yeah, in a starvation mode, you're thinking like 500 to 700 calories.
Okay. Oh, shit.
For a while. A good long while.
So you can either snack on one human for 185 days, or if you're lucky enough, you can also get your hands on 185 Big Macs, and that will keep you alive just as long. Isn't that crazy?
I'd rather have the Big Mac.
That's special sauce. A Big Mac a day keeps the cannibal away.
That's a great tagline.
Can McDonald's sponsor the next human tragedy?
Or they can just sponsor Impolite Society. Send your sponsorship inquiries, too.
The next time you go get a Big Mac after you finish the show, let's be real, you're going to go do it because, we're talking about it. It's in your head. Big Mac or McNuggets, whatever you do, just be sure to tell that minimum wage earning cashier that we sent you to them. They say, this is because of Impolite Society podcast, and I would like to use their promo code
Cannibal.
Yes. But that was a fun quiz. That was way more fun than the quizzes I took in school, even though I was about as accurate on them. Unfortunately, the Common Core does not recognize Big Mac math.
So between Neanderthals and today, a whole lot of people have been eaten all around the globe. But trying to decide why ancient cultures ate each other is pretty tough for archaeologists and historians. There are very few, if any, written texts on these subjects. We do have some fun artwork, which very clearly shows Aztecs eating human flesh, and there's some catchy poems or some catchy lyrics about the pharaohs that are eating people and eating their souls.
Well, I've known a few poets and I've known a few lyricists in my life. And you know what they are? Is dramatic. And I feel like they like to fall onto the age-old literary device of hyperbole.
Hyperbole.
I know how to say it. I was trying to make it sound fancy.
I know. I was clarifying for the listener.
That's how the Greeks would have pronounced it. So when I hear that they're saying that the leaders or their kings or the royalty are consuming people, to me that thinks that it's probably just one big elaborate metaphor that they're using to sound hashtag I am very smart and saying that they're literally consuming the people or taking from them or like, you know, not paying taxes so that they can go on their cowboy mission to outer space. Some might say that Jeff Bezos is consuming his workers.
I mean, that's a good point, which is exactly why it's hard to say. There's a lot of like fuzziness in these historical records. They don't know exactly what they meant. But what we do know about cannibalism or anthropophagy is that the Greeks and Romans seem to have really started this taboo. Their writings were the first that we have that cast cannibalism as something that was bad or evil. The Greek gods, they did it when they were angry and seeking revenge. The monsters in their stories, like the Cyclops, they ate people, which isn't technically cannibalism, but again, it's like the eating of people is gross and bad. And then the Greeks, they turned into Romans. And the Romans took over a huge swath of the world, especially Europe. And thus, the cannibalism taboo seems to have made its way across the world. But did it really? And the reason why I say that is because I feel like everyone labels this as the oldest cultural universal taboo, and myself included before I did this research. But there were a ton of cultures where this was acceptable and a huge part of their life, not their daily life, but part of their life and part of their culture. There aren't many cannibals today, and I'm going to get to the why later on in the research, but around the 1400s, there were plenty. And this is kind of where things get even trickier in the cannibalism anthropophagy story. And it enters Rachel's favorite historical figure, Christopher Columbus.
Boo! we don't like Christopher Columbus. It's a hot take these days, I'm sure.
Yeah, such a controversial stance. So Columbus, he wanted to go to Asia. He ended up in the Americas, and he started looking for gold.
Just like that little mouse Fievel.
And in his first letters back to Spain's Queen Isabella, he said that the native people there, they were a kind and good people that would make suitable Christians. And I even have a quote from his letter.
Of course.
They ought to make good and skilled servants, for they repeat very quickly whatever we say to them. And I think they could very easily be made Christians, for they seem to have no religion. That's what he said to Queen Isabella. But things changed because when they couldn't find that mass amounts of gold that they were looking for, they did find some, but they did not find these mass treasure troves they were hoping for. They started looking for another valuable resource that they could exploit. And a huge resource around the 1400s was people.
But they missed the real export there, which was the cocoa bean. They're sleeping on the cocoa bean. Imagine the world today if we had exported chocolate. There would be no hate. There'd be no crime. We would just all be
fat and happy.
Yep.
That's the dream. Queen Isabella, in her letters to Columbus, she told him that he must treat the native people with respect, unless they were cannibals. And then they could be enslaved because they were gross, disgusting, blah, blah, blah. Because Spain has adopted that Roman Greek mythology of cannibalism being bad and evil. So if they were cannibalism, then they were allowed to be enslaved.
I wonder what happened next.
Exactly. All of a sudden,
old Chris is like, oh my God, I got to make this trip seem profitable in some way. He's like, oh my gosh. Oh, these people. Oh, I saw that one eat a person for sure. He ate like 7 people just now.
Yep.
We better just kind of wrap this thing up, tie a bow on it. There you go, Queen Is.
Yeah, there's your slaves. Exactly. So all of a sudden, everyone is a cannibal. It's funny how that works. The word cannibal is actually derived from Columbus's voyage. The Caribs, which are some of the people that he met in the Bahamas, became the Caribals, which became cannibals because, we white people can't be pronouncing shit.
You've heard me mispronounce so many words in this show alone. It's a proud tradition of my people, and I carry it forward. So then, you know me. I'm a millennial. I like to be PC. I'm a millennial Gen Z cusper. I live right in that sweet land between.
I think you're pretty firmly a millennial.
No.
I consider myself on the Gen Z cusp, but we've got like an 8-year
No,
gap.
you're Gen X.
Oh, okay.
I'm on the other end of the millennial spectrum.
Oh, Jesus. That makes you feel even older.
So I like to be politically correct. So then is the word cannibal, because it comes from a mispronunciation of an indigenous people in the Americas, is that offensive to say cannibals?
Probably to somebody. I don't think the Caribs exist anymore, so I don't think there's anyone really around to be offended. But in another 5 years, yeah, this episode title will probably have to take it down.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying we can change it. We can say from here on out, we can say
Anthropophagy.
Anthropophagy. And we can say that proud, and we can
Say it
sleep at
again?
night. Anthropophagy. Did I get
There
it?
you go. You got it, yeah.
I'm disappointed. I'm so proud of myself, but my ancestors are not, because I pronounced it right.
So after Columbus's voyage, this is where the history of cannibalism really goes off the rails.
Dun-na, dun-na, dun.
And I feel like in history, it's a pendulum. Everything swings too far one way and then too far the other way to overcorrect. And I think it's really actually a safe bet to say that every continent of this planet has had people eating people on it. And it doesn't make those people sick. It's just part of the human story. And so history is complicated, guys. And I think there is some truth to every story that we need to dig in here. We can't just say, oh, Columbus made all this shit up and he's a terrible person. We have to look at the reality of the situation.
Okay, what's the reality of the situation?
Truth one is that Columbus, he did greatly exaggerate the stories of cannibalism so that he could enslave people,
Yes.
as we talked about. And even more importantly, he used it to other these indigenous people. So making them out as savages that we don't need to see as other humans that deserve respect. He seemed to have invented this super efficient form of propaganda. It has been used a lot since then, and one that we are actually still using today.
I think everybody here is familiar with this tactic. So I would say Columbus, he added the anthropophagy element, because we've always been othering people, right? That propaganda is tale as old as time.
Exactly.
But he's the one that added the flavor.
Ooh, that pork princess flavor.
He did. He added it to that propaganda by steering into the taboo of eating human flesh.
Absolutely. And like I said, this is one that we are still using today. QAnon and all this baby eating nonsense, they're using this same thing to say that liberals are cannibals, or eating babies, or worshiping demons. They're using these oldest tricks in the book to cast people as villains. And I see this kind of shit and I'm just like, what is wrong with you? Read a history book, think about the past, but no, people are fucking stupid and they're still falling for it. Incredibly.
You don't know that nobody ate a baby under that pizza restaurant, Laura. You don't know that for sure.
No, I do, because they don't have a basement. There is no under that pizza restaurant.
That's what they want you to think.
Truth, too, is that some of the indigenous people that were colonized by Europeans, they were cannibals. So in doing this research, I looked at a lot of sites. And the more pop science, Guardian, and
Maybe written by some millennials.
Exactly. They talk about how Whitey made it all up just so that he could enslave people, and these natives were all just kind, gentle souls, and their good names were tarnished by the evil Europeans. And there was even a really popular book about this in the late 70s. It was called The Man-Eating Myth. And it still has a lot of traction in some less educated circles that just kind of look at the surface level. And this book, it says that no culture, not Columbus's indigenous people or any other islands that were colonized throughout the ages, none of them have ever practiced ritual cannibalism on a regular basis. And the Europeans, they made it all up so they could feel good about enslaving people and turning them into villains. But this is just simply not true.
How do we know that?
Some of these indigenous people were cannibals. You look at the Aztecs, there are clear drawings of them eating people. These weren't drawings made by Europeans. There were drawings from the pure Aztec culture. They were eating people. The Maori tribe of New Zealand, the Wari tribe of the Amazon, Kuari of New Guinea. These are just a few that we have real tangible evidence into the late 1800s, early 1900s, where we have pure written history that people went there and talked to them, and they're like, yeah, we eat people.
Oh, man. So then here I'm going to turn this whole paradigm on its head by saying that coming back in modern history and removing these elements of their culture, which even though we might not like it as a modern human, was a part of their culture, is that not the same as European colonization by trying to erase a part of what their life was like just because it doesn't fit the noble savage stereotype that we made up?
Yeah, I completely agree. It's just a case of the pendulum swinging too far one way. It's like, okay, Columbus then like greatly exaggerated it, and then now we have this white guilt, and then we're all taking it the other way to say, oh no, we made it all up, and they were all wonderful and amazing, and we've tarnished them. But you're right, there is that level of also like gross superiority that we feel like we have to cover up what we consider their quote mistakes, but it's really just a part of their culture. It's another form of superiority.
Maybe the lesson here is with the pendulum going one way and the pendulum going the other way is maybe Whitey should just learn to mind his own fucking business and butt the fuck out.
Everyone should just learn their own fucking business and butt the fuck out. I will preach to that. Mind your business. That is like my top catchphrase. So I am on board with that. And what we really need to do when we look at this history is to understand the why they did it, and why we, as, you know, European descendants, have such a violent, visceral reaction to it.
Yeah, I'm first in line for that reaction. So tell me more.
There are two main types of cannibalism or anthropophagy, and that is exo and endo cannibalism. Exocannibalism, this is when the victim belongs to another social group. So these enemies are killed in combat, they're prisoners of war, and generally the aim is to take revenge or assimilate virtues such as their strength, because there's a lot of, people didn't understand how biology or life or, anything worked back then. It was all like superstition.
It was all magic.
Yeah, exactly. So if I ate the heart of my fiercest competitor, I can then become as fierce as he is. It's just like this general understanding. Or it can be seen as a wonderfully effective fear tactic. And we can see that it fucking worked, because these Europeans were terrified when they did see these tribes eating the flesh of their enemies. That it was just a purely like, oh snap kind of feel to it.
Then this is the kind of cannibalism that comes to mind. When you say cannibalism, I imagine somebody held down on a table, or like fucking Temple of Doom, the guy's reaching in and pulling out his heart. All this really violent warfare, shrunken heads, bashing someone's brain open and drinking it. That's what I think of when I think of cannibalism. And it definitely makes my stomach churn.
And it's true. This is the kind that they try to pretend that didn't happen at all. And it did. It's just part of history, and we shouldn't shy away from it and pretend that it didn't, because it is a part of that mythicism of saying, oh, we can internalize the strength of my enemy, or they can also, this is a great way of taking revenge, that we have such a visceral reaction to it because it's gross. You know what I mean? It has a very scary feel to it, which was exactly the aim in doing it.
Like when you get in a fight and somebody starts smacking their face right before they're like getting mad.
Yeah.
You're like, whoa, this mofo's crazy.
Exactly.
I'm not going to mess with them. It's kind of that same thing like, oh my God, he just ate him. He just cut him down and ate his heart.
Exactly. It's fucking terrifying.
I don't want that to happen to me.
Exactly. So I'm going to label that as effective.
Mission accomplished.
Check. And the second type of cannibalism is endocannibalism. And this refers to consumption of the deceased that's from your own social group. And this is usually to guarantee that their spirit would remain amongst the living or to release the spirit. It's just something along the lines of destroying the body or internalizing the body. And it's generally to perpetuate their presence or maintain some kind of continuity between life and death. And this is super common.
That's common?
Yeah.
I feel like I've never heard of that.
It's funeral cannibalism, basically. So these individuals die either naturally from old age, which is usually the case. There are some cases of like tribes that kill old people and take them. But again, I understand it because when you're a hunter-gatherer society and you don't have a steady home, a slow person will kill the rest of the group. And both of these types, endo and exo cannibalism, these are ritual cannibalism. This is where the humans participate in it for a greater reason, whether it's to obtain energy, life force, setting a life force free, whatever their belief is. But what's funny is that while Europeans were damning these cultures for this practice, they had their own kind of cannibalism that they were taking part in. And this is the kind that I mentioned at the top that might be a little bit more palatable to us today and to those Europeans.
You telling me us Europeans, our hands aren't clean either?
They are not. And
Oh, shocker.
that is medical cannibalism.
What is that?
So do you remember our buddy Pliny?
Tiny Pliny.
Tiny Pliny from our period episode.
Yeah.
And actually, I mispronounced it, as I've learned from looking at some stuff. It's actually Pliny, not Pliny.
Teeny Pliny.
Teeny Pliny.
Still fits.
And
Still works.
He was all about drinking human blood to cure things, but not menstrual blood. Never menstrual blood.
Oh, yeah. No. That'll fucking rust your insides out and it will kill the crops for 7 years.
But regular vein arterial blood is the best thing in the world. It cures all kinds of stuff. And this was super common throughout Europe for a long time. I listened to a bunch of podcasts about medical cannibalism, and it's really interesting.
So they were drinking the blood of people, and the people were usually dead, right?
Yeah. Dead individuals. It runs the gamut. I'm talking from Pliny's age, so we're talking like ancient Greeks all the way up to like the late 1800s. This is when
That they were drinking blood?
All kinds of stuff, all kinds of human cannibalism. There were certain bones that you could grind up and eat and take in pill form for certain ailments. Fresh liver for other ailments. People who took parts of executed prisoners or digging up dirt that had the blood of executed prisoners in it.
That's crazy.
And just not in Europe either. So in China, adult children, they would feed parts of their own body to their elders to help heal them. They would take like a part of their thigh muscle out and feed it to the old people to help them get better. In the 1500s, this is where the biggest craze came, and it's from eating dried mummy. They called it mummia. And it was all the rage. It was supposed to cure everything.
Mamma mia, it will cure your ails. Yum, yum. Put it in your breakfast milk.
And it's actually extra funny because it's a mistranslation. For the medieval and the 1500s, they thought that they were talking about mummia as in dried mummy, but the texts were actually referring to basically like natural asphalt, that if you ate natural asphalt, it would cure things, which I don't know, maybe it does. I don't know.
I can imagine that is a lot of insoluble fiber in asphalt that could make you a little bit more regular. And who doesn't feel better when they're regular? But this whole thing strikes me as such modern human bullshit.
Yeah.
And this is the same stuff that you see today where I can handle my meat when it's cut up in little steaks and filleted already and prepackaged for me. But if somebody smacked a dead cow on my table, I'd be horrified.
Absolutely. Like, ooh, meat on a bone, gross. Ooh, a chicken nugget? I'll eat that.
Yeah. It's like, oh, I'll drink this criminal's blood, but I don't want you cannibalizing people. Ooh, that's gross that you ate grandma after she kicked the bucket.
Uh-huh. And so it's these Europeans, they're hating on these other cultures for cannibalism, but more specifically, that certain kind of cannibalism. It's not their brand, and they are pissed about it.
Yeah, there's only one way to consume another human, and it's my way.
And in some of this stuff that I was listening to, they were talking about placenta eating being a form of cannibalism. And I was like, I don't know. Like, is that a part of you or is that a part of the baby?
Yeah, because is it cannibalism if you eat yourself?
That's actually a term called auto-cannibalism.
Oh, okay. So auto-cannibalism. But also a placenta is a waste product at that point.
Exactly.
So is Two Girls, One Cup a cannibalistic, like, horror show? I mean, it's a horror show.
Definitely a horror show.
But is it cannibalistic because they're eating human waste? No. I eat a placenta. Eat your placenta every day till Sunday. It's not cannibalism. It's nasty, but, you know, sometimes you got to get that little burst of caloric intake for your gestation.
I mean, I've tasted my own breast milk, so does that make me a cannibal?
No, because that's made to be consumed.
Exactly. I mean, the whole thing, it's all a little bit weird.
So then that means if you swallow after a blowjob, are you a cannibal then too?
Yeah, exactly. We can all recognize that that's bullshit. But there are some other kind of things that people are like, oh, is this medical cannibalism? Like treatments that are derived from human parts. So there's stem cells. There's treatment defined from that. Stuff that is derived from human pituitary glands and other hormonal treatments that are stemmed from human beings. Can that be considered a form of medical cannibalism? So this is all kinds of things that we're still doing today that might be part of this taboo.
And that's actually a very good point. And I had not thought about stem cell therapy as consuming other people as a form of cannibalism. That's a very interesting term, medical cannibalism. If it's about consuming parts of other people, could an organ transplant not be another next step in that line of thinking?
I don't think so, because that's not like ingesting. I mean, not that I don't think stem cells are usually ingested, like you don't swallow them into your stomach.
This may come as a shock to you, but I am not a medical professional. But I am not sure how stem cell therapy works.
Yeah, I don't think stem cells come in pills that you then take orally.
Wait, so that fecal transplant that we talked about in our poop episode, is that cannibalism?
Yeah, I mean, the lines get sticky. And then I read something else that was talking about how, the Eucharist and Catholicism, that's considered cannibalism. And I'm like, that's symbolic cannibalism and nobody believes it anyway. So
okay, Father Mike, the guy who did my whatever first communion. Nobody thinks it's really a human flesh. Nobody does. Nobody believes in transubstantiation. It's like, even if you're the most devout Catholic, you know it's a fucking wafer. And you know it's some nasty wine.
It's symbolic and everyone fucking knows it.
Sorry, watch out for lightning.
But people don't do any of this kind of cannibalism anymore. None of this endo or exo cannibalism. They do a little bit of medical cannibalism in some gray areas. But why? Why don't we do it anymore? And that's because of illness. So we've gotten better at science since the 1500s and, Columbus in the Middle Ages. And so we know about this thing called prions. And prions are scary as hell. A prion is this misshapen protein, but it bends and folds in all kinds of weird ways.
Kind of like a zombie, and it's all bent out of shape, and it's like...
Yeah, and it infects other proteins that are around it.
It's exactly like a zombie. Am I a medical genius?
Yes, you might be. And so then it infects these other proteins that then also misshape. And these cause neurodegenerative diseases like mad cow, Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, and Kuru. Your brain basically turns into a sponge. This is where it does the most damage, is the neurodegenerative part. These diseases are 100% fatal every single time. And what's even scarier is that these prions, they can lay dormant for decades in your body and your brain before they go to work.
Before the zombie decides to start chomping. And they eat brains. Wow, that was a great analogy.
Exactly. Prions are the zombies of the natural world.
So they're like straight boogeyman out there lurking.
And what's actually even weirder is that prions are really freaking hard to kill. Even when you cremate them, like in the 90s, they had to like specially treat people who have Creutzfeldt-Jacob's disease or mad cow. They could be transmittable even after cremation.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Okay. That's freaky. But what do they have to do with cannibalism?
And that is because these prions, they are transmitted a lot through ingestion. And they're really good at infecting others that are within the same species. So prions, they were linked to cannibalism in the 60s. This is when the Foray tribe in Papua New Guinea, they started getting super sick. A lot of researchers came down to figure out what was going on here. And what seems to have happened is that a villager in the Foray tribe, they developed a sporadic Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, which is a disease that's caused by prions. So they had one of these little proteins that went wonky, and then his whole brain turned into a sponge, and they died. And a part of their traditions was to eat the flesh of their dead.
Oh, no.
So this is an example of the funerary cannibalism that we were talking about. So the villagers then and their close family ate the body, and specifically the women and children got the brain.
Oh, no.
And then this disease started to spread. And other people died, and then they ate them. And then another person died, and then they ate them. But again, women and children usually got the brain. This is where most of the prions are concentrated. So women and children were particularly affected by this disease. And so this is also how mad cow spread. So they had a cow that had, again, this fucked up prion, and they ground up the cow and fed it to other cows who then got the fucked up brain disease, and the cycle continues and continues and continues. And then humans who then ate that infected cow meat then didn't develop mad cow, they developed Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. And I'm not pronouncing that right because it's very complicated, but...
The Jacob part's definitely right.
But there are a lot of diseases and other parasites that really are good at hopping from one person to the next through ingestion because they're used to one kind of host. And so passing it on to another is very easy. So they go into ingestion, they make a little home, and then the person eats this other person. And then they're like, oh, I already know this environment. I already set up shop here.
They're primed and ready to go.
So that's when we kind of decided that cannibalism is just kind of not good for us, guys.
Safer to just shut it down.
But given the lateness of this kind of discovery, which prions were only discovered in like the late 1800s and really began to be studied well in the mid 1900s, I don't think we can lay the taboo of cannibalism on just disease. There's a lot more at work here when we talk about that cannibalism taboo. So I talked a lot here about history and about Columbus and all these kinds of things, but I don't think that I have answered this question, which is why is cannibalism so taboo? And I think the real answer here is that it's not. At least not in all forms. The taboo, it's first written down, spread by the Greeks, and picked up by European culture, but a lot of people on the planet, they didn't get the memo. They didn't give a shit about the Greeks. These people across the globe, they were just munching away. So I think that we really need to muse on the question of why is cannibalism so taboo in modern culture?
Yes.
Why was Columbus's claim of cannibalism so effective? Why are we so disgusted by this idea? And that question is not really one that science can answer. This is more about sociology. This is more about our modern sense of people that we really need to think through to answer.
When did life become more precious? When did the human body become sacred?
Exactly. And we are going to jump to those questions after this break, and we're going to get into the musing sections where we can really dig into the details of this.
Chow down on it.
Okay, so the real culprits, or I should say the likely culprits of why we think of cannibalism as the worst thing in the world in this modern culture. There are a couple of different theories, and I'm gonna run these by you, Rachel, and you tell me what you think.
Okay, I like it. You know, I've learned a lot so far, and I'm ready to put that learning into some critical thinking, some contextualizing, and just dig into it.
Absolutely. Theory number one is this increase in interpersonal relationships. So as we went from a hunter-gatherer society to this more agricultural society, like around the times of the Greeks and the Romans, this longer lifespan came to be the regular. And that meant more time to form bonds and relationships with other individuals. And in my opinion, people tend to chill out as they get older and a little bit less likely to drink the blood of their enemies, sometimes literally.
No, I can get that. So I think there's two sides to this argument. One, right, is the piece that you're saying that you live longer, you're a little bit more mellow. But to me, that piece doesn't quite track so much because it's always the 18-year-olds that are going to be sent out into battle.
And they're always wanting to drink the blood of their enemies.
They're hyped up, man! They're hyped up on that tea. So I could see where that doesn't change even if life gets longer. But I think what this is also saying is that for those more personal bonds and those deeper relationships, for that endo-cannibalism, where it's a lot harder to cut your mom's femur out of her leg and crack it open for the marrow when she's been a part of your life for 50 years.
Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head, is that longer bonds make it harder to eat those individuals.
Even though, you know, we get into the idea of the endo-cannibalism or eating your loved one is actually kind of a beautiful sentiment when you think about it, because it's keeping their energy, it's keeping their literally turning their body into life for your loved ones.
Yeah.
And I mean, I can think of worse things to happen to your body after you die than to sustain your children and your children's children.
Yeah, like necrophilia. Some weirdo comes along and fucks your dead body. I would much rather my life force sustain my loved ones than to be as a sexual fuck toy for some weirdo.
No arguments.
No arguments there. So the next theory is kind of our place in the world. So human beings, we do not like to think of ourselves as food. We are top of the food chain. We are killing animals left and right. And it's really upsetting to us on a visceral level to think that we get knocked down a rung, that we are then the prey. We are the food. We are the sustaining life force. This doesn't necessarily have to do with the time frames, but more of just an idea is that we've gotten more and more high and mighty in our place in the world, and that we just don't like to think of ourselves as food,
as part of the food chain or as part of nature. And I think that tracks to me with the time frame, though, because like you said, agriculture, culture, the Greeks were getting into philosophy, higher levels of thinking, all this stuff.
Yeah.
So we were
higher learning.
So we were starting to remove ourselves from nature. And that's when you also saw that taboo happen, right? We're no longer a part of the circle of life. We are withdrawn, we are removed, we are above it. So that's why it's wrong to eat a person, because a person is not an animal. We are something different. And that's why it ties into the Greek mythology, you know, the Cyclops and the other things happening and making it so taboo. So this one makes a lot of sense to me, and it makes a lot of sense why the Europeans could get down with drinking blood or taking ground up people in the form of a pill, but they couldn't adjust to the idea or couldn't handle the idea of somebody really just gnawing on a human bone.
You hit the nail on the head with the next one, especially. These two kind of fold together, which is the people are special. We like to think of ourselves as separate from nature. These more primitive cultures in South America or in Papua New Guinea or the what we all now call the Polynesian Islands, these more primitive cultures, they practice that ritual cannibalism. And I think personally that they were probably more in tune with their place in the circle of life.
Yeah, no doubt, because I watched a documentary once about some unfound people or some tribes that are in the Amazon to this day that don't have contact with the Western world. And they were interviewing one of the guys who eventually was like, fuck this, I'm out, I'm going to go live with the people, like the modern people. And they were interviewing him, and he was just like telling stories about his time in the jungle. And he was like, I saw my grandmother get eaten by a jaguar.
Oh, shit.
Well, he was like, God damn, I was saving that for later. The fucking jaguar just nabbed it. Like when my dog eats the food off the counter. It's the same thing. No, but it's like when you're living in that environment, when that is your reality, that your grandmother can get snagged by a jaguar at any moment of the day, you really can't see yourself as apart from the circle of life and the food chain. But once you start putting up walls and houses and fires and, you know, weapons, all of a sudden that gets further and further from your daily life.
You think that you're not anything like these animals. You're completely different from it. You're not your you're not your ape cousin. You're a human. You're so refined and so different.
Yes. We'd like to put clothes on ourselves and hide our fecal matter.
And then I think the ultimate expression of this is religion. So as these more popular religions, the ones that we know today, started to crop up around the world, and that's the triad of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, burial practices start to get super important in world history. So with the rise of that, the cannibalism waned throughout Europe and throughout much of the world. In most of these modern religions, body is the house of the soul. We aren't animated only by life, like any animal, but by intelligence, self-awareness, emotion. These are the things that people call the soul, religious people call the soul. So to desecrate that body is then to desecrate the soul, because once the soul is gone, this is all we have left, is then the body, which was the temple of the soul, and it has to be treated very specifically with a lot of respect. Even today, more Orthodox Jewish people, they can't be cremated, and the Catholic Church didn't give the okay until 1963 to be cremated.
Which, ironically, they still haven't weighed in on the whole touching children scenario. But don't worry, they laid their stake in the ground for cremation.
On cremation, yeah. They really laid the line in the sand on cremation, touching children. Yeah.
We don't know. They haven't made an official stance.
So, I mean, that's it. I think that's what we nailed in on. And at the end, because all of those, I feel like, come down to the general feeling of that human beings are super special. And that's why we can't eat them, is that because we are not part of the food chain, because we are apart from nature, we have a soul, we have intelligence, we have self-awareness, we are, or even holy in our own existence from the religious aspect. And that is why modern people think that cannibalism is so disgusting, because of how we view ourselves as individuals. But, you know, more ancient cultures, more primitive cultures that are more in tune with nature, this is not as disgusting. So it really isn't this cultural universal. It's more of a modern thing that has spread the globe the way that Europeans have spread the globe, of our specialness and the fact that just we absolutely do not eat people. No. And that is why Rachel wanted to barf.
Truly, yeah, wanted to spew, because I had subscribed to that. And, you know, it's easy to say that, you know, the way that we unfolded and unpack this music section, going from humans are apart from nature, humans are special, humans are sacred, and it is kind of like the natural flow that I think culture went through as well, kind of stemming from that first thought that personal relationships are what made us special. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I don't want to say that that's the case for those societies that are more in tune with nature, because their relationships matter to them too. They're just as important to them. So I would say it's definitely got to come with more of the separation from nature than it does the value of each other, because I'm sure that man, he felt the same grief that we felt when his grandmother was...
He loved his grandma when she was eaten by the jaguar.
While we joke about him wanting to eat her later, you know, he might have wanted to, but because that was part of his religion, the same way our bodies are sacred and that we should put them in the ground, that could be the sacred part of human life, is to be able to pass it on in more than one way.
Or just because when you live in a hunter-gatherer society, free food isn't just lying around all the time.
Every calorie is sacred.
Exactly. Every calorie is sacred more than every human husk is sacred.
Energy is life in that situation.
Yeah.
It is the future. So it does make a little bit of sense. And honestly, this conversation has, as crazy as it sounds to say, it has made me a little bit softer, or a little warmed up to the idea of cannibalism, which is even still crazy coming out of my mouth. By changing the perspective and looking at it, I had no idea endo-cannibalism was a thing. Like, I only pictured Temple of Doom shit. So to see it as almost as an act of love, of giving yourself to those, your tribe, the ones who matter most to you, it almost makes it beautiful.
Yeah.
Which is not where I thought I would land today after when we started this conversation, thinking about Brendan in theater asking me if I would continue to eat human after I found out it was human.
I think this is a good place to wrap up. But I hope you learned something today. I thought this was a great topic. Thank you so much, Liz and Dakota, for sending in this question.
I really appreciate this question and great research, Laura. I walked away from this with a different outlook on such an interesting topic.
So thanks, everyone, for joining us. Let us know what you think. Send us an email at rude@impolitesocietypodcast.com. Let us know what rude questions we should tackle next. Follow us on the socials, Instagram, TikTok. Those are the most active.
Yeah, that's what we do. We do those two at this point. And, if you liked what you heard, obviously you must have if you're still here. Make sure to tell a friend about us. You know what we're about. You know who your friends are. If you know a friend who might like us, pass us along. Recommendations are the lifeblood of impolite society. And what is our saying?
Friends don't let friends listen to bad podcasts, guys.
Yeah, so send them this one.
Oh, we got Bug here. He's purring at me.
Oh, is he going to say meow like we used to sign off with for Big Talk days?
Oh, can you talk? Can you talk, Bug?
Oh, I hear his purring.
No, just purrs.
Oh my
no
God,
meows.
he's never not meowing except for right
I know.
now.
Right?
Oh, what's that sound you might hear?
Is this the pounding of long bones waiting to get the marrow out of them? Bum, 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 bum.
I don't even think I could eat that of a cow or like an animal.
Oh, I have many a time.
It seems disgusting.
It's good. It's like jelly fat.
Jelly fat. I have enough of that, so I think I'm good for now.
See ya.
Okay, bye.